Welcome to AK Recap. Today I'm going to explain the movie called Escape Room, released in the year 2019. A man is seen frantically actually trying to solve an escape riddle before something bad occurs. He panics as he realizes the room is closing in on him, squeezing and knocking over the furniture as it gets closer and closer. However, he soon discovers a note that instructs him to follow the light to greener pastures. He quickly realizes what it means and heads for the top green book. Every second, the distance between a shelf and the room's walls increases. He got the book but fell down the ladder by accident. The clue on the book tells him to solve time's great mystery. He deduces that the clue should be on a clock, but he doesn't see any clocks nearby. He quickly realizes, however, that the answer to the code was 4862. He rushes to enter the code as the walls close in, knocking down lights and pushing the shelves down. He enters all of the codes correctly, but the walls continue to close in on him, squeezing furniture closer and closer as he screams for help, until he is crushed. 3 days earlier in Chicago, we meet 3 different people in this chapter. First, we meet Zoe, a brilliant but socially awkward student at Chicago University. Then there's Jason, a stockbroker who works in a business, and finally, there's Ben, the grocery store worker we saw earlier being squashed. Later that day, each of them receives a black box with a note instructing them to always think outside the box in order to open new doors and a chance to escape. The box appears to be a strange-looking puzzle box, and the structure is initially very confusing to them. But they all figured out how to open it. The box provides a note stating that this serves as an entry voucher for minus escape rooms. Be the first person to escape our most immersive room yet and you could win $10,000 at minusescaperooms.com. So the next day, they all go to the minus building, and we meet 3 more contestants. Amanda, Danny, and Danny appear to be escape room geeks, and they all talk about their experiences with escape rooms and bond while waiting for the game's master to come in and tell them the story and take them to the escape room. Van becomes irritated and tired of waiting and decides to go outside. However, as he tries to open the doorknob breaks off, revealing a combination lock. Nerdy Kid quickly realizes this and informs the others that this could be the escape room and that the game has already begun. So they all started looking for clues. Soon after, Mike discovers a book with the title Fahrenheit 451. Zoe theorizes that it must be the combination passcode, but as she enters it, the ceiling begins to heat up. Amanda is afraid and tells Zoe to turn it off, but it appears that it cannot be turned off. Ben suggests they simply break the lock so he can get a fire extinguisher, but as he forcefully pulls it off, it becomes even worse and the walls of the room begin to heat up, making them even more terrified. Even with Danny's assurances that he has seen things like this before and that it is all part of the game, they all agree that it is not fun at all. Zoe discovers a key in the extinguisher and uses it to open a locked window, where they discover a telephone that immediately begins to ring. Jason takes it, and the recording informs them that in order to get the most out of their game, they must conform to all posted rules. But as he slams the phone down, the room begins to heat up and they all begin to panic as the room is sealed up. Amanda is more terrified than the others because of her traumatic experience with fires, but Zoe tries to calm her down, giving her a drink from a dispenser. She notices the burn scars on Amanda's neck as they all try to figure out how to get out, but it appears that the more force they use, the hotter the room becomes. Zoe discovers a sign on the wall that reads "Use the coasters at all times," so she walks over to the table and presses the coaster. It is revealed down an exit. They quickly realize the twist. They had to hold all 6 coasters down in order for the passage to open, but once they let go, the door closed and the room became even hotter. As a result, Jason decides to investigate the path that the vent leads to. Zoe quickly comes up with an idea and decides to use water from the dispenser to keep the coasters in place. So they all try to do the same thing. Although, as Amanda goes through the vent, we learn that she is claustrophobic and begins having flashbacks to her trauma. So Zoe goes after her to assist, but the water soon runs out. Luckily, Ben had his flask with him, and he uses it to fill the last glass, and the last 2 manage to make their way out of the room just before a blazing object from the ceiling engulfs the entire room in fire. They proceed to the next escape room, which is a locked cabin, despite their shock at what has just occurred. Jason encourages them to keep going because of the 10 grands. He discovers the key to the first lock and Ben finds the passcode to the second lock as they open the cabin doors. They emerge in a very cold blizzard, and the cabin door closes behind them. Danny decides to explore but is stopped by an invisible wall, and as he falls to the ground, it is revealed that they are all standing on ice, which has begun to crack. Even through Danny's assurances that the ice is not real and is most likely a sound effect, and that cameras are in place to ensure that nothing bad happens to them, but as soon as he touches the invisible wall, vents begin to open, blowing out cold, freezing air, and everyone urges Danny to leave. The windows in the cabin are also closed, and Danny advises them to begin looking for clues. Jay discovers a door between the walls, but it appears to be locked. While Amanda, Zoe, and Danny find a chest with a clue stating that true north is a lie, they also discover a jacket inside, but only one. Amanda understands that the people who are doing this to them want them to fight over scarce resources. However, she informs them that it will not work and that they will share it, so she gives the jacket to Zoe to go first. Soon after, Mike discovers a fishing rod nearby, which they can use to check out the massive fishing hole they just discovered, and Zoe notices a compass inside her jacket and follows its direction, which leads to a stuffed polar bear. She finds a magnet inside the polar bear's mouth and informs them of it. They attach it to the fishing rod and use it to extract a frozen key from the bottom, which appears to be the key to the door Jason discovered earlier. They try to break the ice, but it is too heavy. When they ask for Ben's lighter, he decides to be a jerk and throw it on the ice. Danny tells them he'll go get it, but as he picks up the lighter, the ice breaks and he falls into the freezing water, being carried away by the current. Only Ben has seen this, and the other realizes it seconds later. They all started looking for him inside, but the current kept pushing him around, and they couldn't figure out where he was until we saw Danny drowning beneath the ice. They were all taken aback by what had just caused and began to suspect Ben was involved because he was the only one who saw him drown. They began to suspect Ben after Danny mentioned something about a games master, but Ben defends himself by telling them that they are all just as shady and suspicious as he is, pointing out all of their flaws. Jason tells them to stop because the only thing that matters is that they get out of there as soon as possible. So they all put their hands on the ice to melt it and get the key out. Hours later, they succeeded. However, we also see Jason having flashbacks about being in a blizzard similar to this one before he began to lose control and grab the key before it melted, while the others followed behind him. The key unlocks a door behind them, and as they all rush towards it, the ice begins to break, but they all make it inside the next escape room. The next room they enter appears to be a cocktail bar, except it appears to be hanging upside down while they walk on the ceiling. Soon after, a telephone rings, but because they're upside down, the phone is placed on a table above them. However, the phone wire fell and Mike caught it, but when he answered, it made a screeching noise. When the annoying elevator music started, they noticed that the door did not appear to have a handle, so they concluded that they must be looking for a doorknob. Mike inadvertently steps on something, causing the ground beneath him to fall to pieces, but Ben manages to pull him back before he can take the next step. So they all get up and hold on to something. Amanda, on the other hand, managed to make her way up in order to gather more information. She discovers a microwave that requires a password after attempting 1, 2, 3, 4, and 1 with no success. Zoe notices a bookshelf puzzle and works her way to the other side with Mike's assistance to solve it. She quickly solves the puzzle and they obtain a code for the lock, but it turns out to be the incorrect code, and the ground continues to disintegrate even further. Therefore, Mike and Ben move to the shelf where Zoe is. However, the shelf could not support all three of them and started to collapse. So Zoe tries to get off the shelf but falls to the ground and becomes unconscious. Here, we see Zoe having a flashback to a traumatic experience she had with her mother during a plane crash in which her mother was hanging upside down. Jason managed to wake her up quickly, and they climbed up. Zoe informs Amanda that the room is upside down, so the code may be incorrect. Amanda enters the code and it works. She discovers an eighth ball inside, which is the doorknob they seek. She tries to get to the other side by jumping over to the pool table and avoiding looking down at the terrifying bottom. But the ball falls out of her pocket, and despite their advice, she jumps down and manages to catch it before it rolls over. The ground began to crumble once more, and Amanda tossed the ball to Jason, grabbing onto the telephone wire just as the floor fell down. Now that Amanda is barely hanging on, the others try to reach for her with a pool stick, but the wire snaps, causing her to fall. Zoe, Mike, and Jay are all stunned and terrified by what has just occurred. But they all must continue. The next room they enter appears to be a medical room, where each of them was admitted when they experienced their trauma. They discovered their medical records while in the hospital following their post-traumatic stress disorder. Zoe tells them about her plane crash with her mother, in which she was the only survivor. Jason tells them about his trauma when he was trapped in the middle of the ocean with his friend and developed hypothermia. His friend attempted to kill him, but he survived. Ben tells them about being in an accident with 6 of his friends and being the only survivor. Mike tells them about an occupational hazard that took the lives of all of his team members. It turns out that the people who were torturing them knew everything about them and wanted to use that against them. Because they were all the sole survivors of horrific incidents, the escape rooms were built around their traumatic experiences. So the people who did this to them wanted to run a statistical probability experiment to see who would be the luckiest among the lucky. A new game begins, but Zoe informs them that she will not play it because that is what they want them to do. But they tell her that they don't have a choice. While the guys continue to figure out clues, Zoe destroys all of the cameras in the room because they are being watched. Jay discovers a carbon monoxide poison and concludes that they will poison them, while Mike informs Zoe that they desperately need her assistance or they will all die. However, Zoe does not stop smashing the cameras, and the others discover an EKG machine, which is their next clue. It was necessary for them to use someone with a very high heart rate, so Jason uses a machine to shock Mike, but it does not appear to be working, and Mike passes out and goes away breathing. The 5 minutes are quickly up, and the poisonous gas is released, but Jason figured out how to make the machine work, and he makes his way out. Ben tells Zoe they've found a way out, but she keeps breaking down the walls and tells him to just go with Jason. So Ben had to give up her, and Zoe collapses and becomes unconscious as a result of carbon monoxide poisoning. With only Jason and Ben left, Ben confronts Jason about how selfish he was, telling him that he killed Mike and didn't care. He also informs him that he most likely killed his friend on that kiosk. Jason tells him that survival is a choice and that he did what he needed to do to survive, confirming that he did indeed kill his friend. He tells him that they should just keep looking for clues to get out of there, and they come across a hatch that appears to be jammed shut, but they both manage to open it together. However, it appears that they put something on the handle, causing them to hallucinate, and they now had to find the antidote. The room continues to spin around them. Ben is trying hard to find an antidote. He quickly finds it, and as soon as he tells Jason about it, Jason knocks him down and tries to take it from him. They both struggle and fight for it, but Ben manages to obtain it and inject it into himself. His hallucination soon ends, and we see Jason dead. Ben descends the hatch and enters the same escape room we saw in the first scene. After the people have left, return to Zoe. Clean up the dead bodies in the room. They make fun of Zoe because the oxygen mask was right in front of them. But Zoe appears behind them and attacks them, knocking them out with a pole. She then takes their gun and runs away. Meanwhile, just as Ben was about to be squashed into bits, he noticed a path and managed to make his way inside the fireplace, where it stopped and began to go back, allowing Ben to make his way out. He exits the room and enters a section of the building where he sees photos of the eliminated contestants. When he finally meets the game master, he congratulates him on finishing the final level, and Ben asks him what kind of psychopath he is and if he just likes killing people for fun. It turns out that the game was created for rich and famous people who enjoy watching people fight for their lives, and they've been doing so year after year. The game master attempts to strangle Ben, but Ben removes the glass from his injury and stabs him, but he continues to strangle him. Soon after, Zoe appears and shoots at him, but he manages to escape. As she searches for him, he appears behind her and attacks her, grabbing and aiming the gun at her head, but luckily, Ben knocks him out with a bottle, takes the gun from him, and shoots him dead, and the two make their way out of the building. Van is admitted to the hospital, while Zoe follows the police to the location of the incident. But there was no evidence of what Zoe had described to the police inside the building, and no matter how much she tried to tell them about everything that had happened earlier, she only sounded insane because the building had been abandoned and there was no proof to back up what she claimed. 6 months later, we see that Zoe and Ben have recovered from their ordeal. Ben tells Zoe about his new job and inquires about the massive paper stack she was carrying with her. She opens it and shows Ben the articles that show how Amanda, Jason, Danny, and Mike's deaths were scripted. But Ben tells her that she needs to let it go, but Zoe disagrees and tells Ben that she has found their location and is ready to put them in jail for what they did to them. And although Ben wasn't initially convinced, she managed to persuade him that those people need to answer for what they did. In the final scene, we meet the mastermind behind it all, and it appears that they are aware that Zoe and Ben are on their way. Movie also end here. Thank you so much for watching. Please like and subscribe my channel.